that closer? Is that okay? Thanks. Good morning, everybody. My name's Sandy Beach, and I'm an alcoholic. It's not that my knees are bad. I just like sitting on bar stools. Anyway, I'm very honored to be here in the middle of all this spiritual energy and listen to the speakers and presenters. It's really very moving. And I've known for a long time that there's great AA in Texas. And I've known a lot of the great Texas AAers. And I'm glad to be here. When I think about Alcoholics Anonymous, I get goosebumps that this society exists on planet Earth like an oasis, and it just expands by one alcoholic talking to another. There's no real plan other than God's plan. And when it's time to go in the next country, it goes there. And then pretty soon it gets translated, and then it just keeps moving. And I don't think when we looked at the very beginning, we could have dreamed that this could have happened. And it did. And it finally got me in 1964, and it dragged me in. And I fell in love the first night. I was very sick. I was an outpatient from a mental ward and shook and was frightened, and I had been drinking even as an outpatient, and I knew they were going to catch me and throw me out of the Marine Corps, and I somehow just dialed AA on this Sunday, and back in those days, you didn't go to a meeting, you were taken by your sponsor. You called, and then they sent you someone to your house. And he came, and great big guy named Bill Terwilliger. He's my sponsor for 42 years. And all I remember him saying was, "Get in the car." That's all I remember. And I went there to the Manassas group, and it was a group anniversary, and it went on forever. I had been sober 3 hours when the meeting started, and I was sober 8 hours when the meeting ended. And they had group anniversaries. They had turkey and ham, and I wasn't eating anything, and I just shook, and people were so happy with sobriety. And then they had square dancing after it was over, fiddle players, and old Charlie Linden was a member out there, the Arkansas Traveler. Some of you may remember old Charlie. And I, at one point, decided to leave. Nobody was paying attention to me. I was snuck out on the porch, and it was sleeting. There were no street lights. It was just like, I don't remember exactly. It was an Odd Fellows Hall, and I couldn't tell which way to run. It just was confusing. And an Al-Anon lady named Betsy Lynch came up and put her hand on my shoulder, and I turned around, and I looked like an angel. And she said, "Come on back in, it's going to be fine." And it was. And it's been fine ever since. And so my hat's off to Al-Anon from the first second that I got here. I'm going to talk a little bit about my story, but I like talking about our society more than anything. And so I'll try and do it in 10 minutes. The brief version of a crash. And I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut in 1931. My parents went through the Depression and survived. They were really just positive outlook. I have one sister. She has 31 years in AA now. While I'm doing statistics, I have 6 children and 15 grandchildren, and 2 daughters in AA and 1 grandson in AA, so I've got 3 generations covered. I hope you're all doing your share. None of my sons made it in. All 3 of them were into drugs and alcohol in college, and I pictured the 4 of us talking at a conference someday. And they, one by one, said, well, enough of that. I think I'll straighten out and be a normal, responsible, wonderful citizen. And part of me is ashamed of them, to tell you the truth. I don't get it, to tell you the truth. But they're wonderful. And I had the same feeling that every other alcoholic has, that I didn't belong in that family. I didn't belong on planet Earth. My mother was a Catholic. My father was a Protestant. He had to convert. His family was very upset. And I sat in the church with my sister, who still goes there and thinks it's the most wonderful place in the world. And from the day she went there, she felt comforted and loved. I, on the other hand, felt like it was sort of a German prison camp of some sort. And the little Gestapo nuns were coming up, and they were speaking in Latin, and God knows what they were plotting. And I was very nervous about confession because I knew they were gathering evidence for the trial later on. And so I was not a happy little kid. It was I was always on the edge of fainting or very nervous. And I was probably about 9. I looked up at the crucifix, and it was enormous, and just couldn't miss it. And it was like it spoke to me, and it said, "Little boy, do you see this?" And I went, "Oh. Well, that's what God did to his only son that he loved. Guess what he's going to do to you?" And that did it. Boy, I did not like going there. It just scared me. Now, that's not what the church taught. That's what I decided that it taught. That's what I made up in my little head. And my sister saw an entirely different world. And so it ended up I was a very good student, a good athlete, in spite of having polio. I recovered from that. It was a miracle. And I went into a little prep school. It funneled me right into Yale University. I got down there, and for the first time in my life, I felt that I was in the wrong place. I had worked on their buildings. I was in construction, did all kinds of climbing and that kind of work. But these guys that came from all around the country, they were all rich, and they were all handsome, and they all knew what was going on, and I didn't know why. I was in their midst. It was that sense. I knew they were going to discover an imposter and ask that I leave, because I certainly didn't qualify to be in their ranks. And so I hadn't had a drink yet, and I felt very uncomfortable, but I was at a social event where I just couldn't even approach anybody to talk to them. I could see in their eyes that they didn't want to even know me. And so I did have some drinks. And after about 2.5, I turned around, and unbelievably, everyone wanted to know me. Everyone in the room was begging me to be their friend. I couldn't believe this. It was like, my God, what is this all about? And I just ran over and started talking to everybody, and I was free from my fears. My creativity had been released. I could be me for the first time in my life. And I understood what people were saying. Isn't this a wonderful world? And I said, yes. It is, and I wished I had started drinking in grammar school. It was just wonderful. And later on, I said to myself, if that was 3 drinks, I wonder what 20 will do. And I did that and got sick, and you know what it feels like the first time. And I slept on the bathroom floor and vomited, and it just felt so awful as the sun came up. And I remember sitting on my bed with my head splitting, and the thought occurred to me, are you going to drink tonight? And it was just a split second, and I went, yes. Yes. This hatchet in my head is a small price to pay for what I had last night. Because what happened to me is what happens to all alcoholics. It was close to a spiritual awakening. It solved every problem that I had. It told me who I was. It made me at peace with you, with the world, with God, with myself. It was just such a power to transform my world. And without realizing it, I naturally was willing to pay any price for this. And I started paying it with grades. The high grades went. And then the athletics went. And then I'm getting in fights. And now I'm in jail. Now I may not graduate. But I did, barely, probably by .00001 at the best. And the Korean War was going on, the draft, and some of us joined the Marine Corps. And after the rude awakening of their greeting when you arrive, wow. I went off for 6 months of training to be a platoon leader. And while I was there, I decided I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I was part of something, and it was something. And it was an honor to be in there. And I've only wanted to be in 2 outfits, in Marine Corps and AA. And I'll tell you, and I saw a training movie about pilots. That looked attractive, so I signed up. I'd met a lovely woman. We got married, and we went on our honeymoon and went to Pensacola, Florida. And I got airsick on the way down in the commercial planes. And that air sickness lasted for a while, but eventually I was very good at it. And I would be number 2 or 3 in each phase as we went through carrier and formation and so on down. And lo and behold, in Kingsville, Texas, I finished and got my wings. Went through Corpus and then Kingsville. I remember it was rather dusty. And I was sent out to El Toro, California. I remember driving across Texas, drinking beer. I thought that there was something wrong with my car because I was still in Texas and had been... I think I had been driving for 3 weeks and I was still in Texas. And I got to El Toro and we went into a Marine training squadron and it was so exciting. And by the time I got finished there, the Korean War was over and we got sent overseas into a frontline fighter squadron with the hot stuff airplanes of the 50s. They're all in mothballs now, but they were very exciting then. And I began a very exciting adventure. We had 6 children, got transferred all over, did all kinds of different jobs, flew about 12 different kind of airplanes, came out of being a flight instructor in Pensacola and was sent to a photo squadron at Cherry Point during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And these planes were the fastest that I had flown. The Crusader was 1,000 miles an hour, and then our radar plane was easy to fly. It had the radar guy in the straight wing, and you could fall asleep, and that thing would keep going. So we flew both type of missions. My alcoholism had progressed to the point where I was experiencing withdrawal symptoms in the plane because I was not drinking for 8 to 10 hours prior to flying. And it started as just like a loss of vision, a peripheral vision. And then I would have the shakes. And then I would start to sweat. And then I would be extremely anxious. And I'm all alone in the plane, and I said, this is just passing, it'll go away. But each month it got worse. And I remember a period of about 8 months. And near the end, I just didn't even want to get in the plane because I didn't know what was going to happen. I was not going to make it. I wanted to just get out of my own skin. I've talked to other alcoholics. They'd be getting a haircut, and they had to leave. You just can't stay where you are anymore. You must run and go out. And that's what I was experiencing in my body. But there was nowhere to go. And so sometimes I'd fly with one hand on the ejection seat. And I'd fly the mission. They could fly all the mission with the stick. It had all the buttons on it to take the pictures and all that. And the finale came, oddly enough, in the radar plane. And that we were on a flight of 4 on the cross country. And I started realizing that I had to get out of there. And I started looking around, and that plane didn't have an ejection seat. I mean, I was going to get out. It was just, I'm sorry, but I'm leaving. And I thought I was going to have a heart attack. It was just, these withdrawals were getting worse. And that plane, you had to pull a panel up, and there was some kind of a chute, and you slid out the bottom, and I was looking at it, trying to remember how it worked. And I suddenly remembered the guy next to me didn't know how to fly. And I said, well, I can't do that. So I called for an emergency. I declared an oxygen emergency. And when you have those, you have to land immediately. So the flight leader, believing it, found an Air Force base nearby, and the 4 of us landed. And we went to the club and drank. And they found no problem with the oxygen. And I came out the next morning, and I just turned to the flight leader, and I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And it was quite a bit of shame to go back to that squadron and face my buddies. It was a very exclusive squadron, only 15 pilots, no lieutenants. And it took about 3 months for headquarters to give me a new specialty since I wasn't going to be flying. And I could feel them looking at me. I was doing the legal work, and they'd come by, and I wouldn't even make eye contact with them. I just felt like I was a failure. After almost 13 years of flying, I had failed. I'm a piece of you-know-what. And I could feel them looking at me. As I was so happy when I finally got transferred out. Well, last year I was out in Los Angeles, and I was invited to talk at the Brentwood group. Great group. God, 500 people. It's all fired up. It's really something. And there was a lady coming there to get her 30-year medallion. And her husband is not in AA, but he comes to meetings with her, and he's been a great supporter. And he was driving her there because she wasn't feeling too good, and she mentioned that she was excited Sandy Beach was leading the meeting. And he said, was he a pilot? And she said, yeah. She said, I think I know him. Tell him to come out and let me talk to him. So right before I'm going up to talk, I go out and meet this guy who I've never seen. And he looks at me and he said, 1962, you were flying an F-3D radar plane in a flight of 4 on a cross country, and you declared an oxygen emergency, and the planes landed, and you never flew again. And I went, how did you know that? He said, I was in the plane with you. And I went, wow. I said, really? And he started filling me in on what was really going on. I only had my vague memory. And he was another pilot. And there'd been a hurricane evacuation, and when that happens, you fly all the planes somewhere safe, and then you drink until the hurricane goes by. And so there wasn't any radar guys going. It was all pilots that were going to go. And he had been recalled from American Airlines for the Cuban Missile Crisis, and had just retired maybe 8 years earlier as the second senior pilot at American. And there he was. And so he came back the next day and brought photographs and all this stuff. I was up at a conference in Oxnard, and started filling me in on who the guys were and what was going on. And then he said, "Did you know how popular you were in that squadron? Do you know how much everybody loved? Do you know how much it broke their hearts? Oh, the colonel was doing everything he could. It was just killing us that you were going through that. Oh, my God." So I had to go back to 1962, where I had all the shame, and go erase, 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 and put in love. And it felt great. I actually went back and changed my past, and it felt great. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous and spirituality is all about. That's what old ideas avail us nothing mean. They mean our old ideas are the ones we made up under the circumstances of the time, and then we emotionally reacted to those ideas, and we've been suffering ever since. And that was one of those great freedoms from that 3-month period. And now I look back on it, and it feels wonderful. There was no alcohol program in the military. There was nowhere for an alcoholic to go. There was nothing they could do to help me. Nobody ever heard of AA. And so it was just a blessing. And I was out there last week, and I saw him again. And we sat and talked. What a wonderful thing. Anyway, I got, believe it or not, retrained as an air traffic controller. And did that for a couple years. And it came time, and then I was overseas, and I drank around the clock, and I was very, very sick. I lost 50 pounds due to malnutrition. I was a disaster waiting to happen, and I came back to Quantico, Virginia, and had a grand mal seizure. And that's how I ended up in the Bethesda Naval Hospital. In about 5 days, the DT started, and I guess I was screaming and running around. They put me in a straitjacket and locked me up for 6 months. So that was how they treated alcoholism in '64. But in the hospital, an AA group talked their way in, even though the psychiatrist said they didn't have any alcoholics, and that's how I heard about AA. So that, some months later, when I was an outpatient and at home and had started drinking again, and I called the intergroup, and they sent this guy over, and he took me to meeting every night. And the two of us were captains. And when it came time for promotion, neither one of you get 2 years to get promoted to major or you're out. And neither one of us made it the first year. He had been in the same nut ward. And the second year he made it, and I didn't. And so myself and my family, and my 6 kids with 2 years sobriety are dumped out. I had a big resentment about God. Okay, God, I did everything you said. Look what you're doing to my family. Look at us. We're out in the street. This is your love. Oh boy, I really had a thing going with God. I had a wonderful resentment, and I just sat home. I didn't talk about it because people will get it away from you if you talk about it. You want to keep a resentment, don't tell anybody about it, for God's sake. Just stay home and cook it in the oven. It'll get big. There won't be any room in the room for you with your resentment. It'll be so big. And about 3 months after I was out, the team of officers that I was working with, they went around putting on a presentation about the Marine Corps. It was headed by a general. And they were going to Denver to do a presentation, and they flew into a mountain. So if it had been fair and I got my way, I would have been on that plane. And I knew when I read it in the paper that God knew I read it. And I felt kind of humble because I'd just been cursing him. And I said something like, well, if you just told me this was going to happen, I wouldn't have been saying all this stuff. So I guess that was my first lesson, in that you can't tell whether an event is good or bad. Events aren't good or bad. They just are. They just are. We put the label on them, and then we have to live with it. It just is. And so that started my journey. I ended up with several other jobs, but I had a wonderful career with the credit union movement, which is a wonderful, blessed group of people that provide good service to people that need it. And it was an honor to be their lobbyist up in Washington. And I remember coming down to the Texas Credit Union League and talking. They were way ahead, getting a bank and doing a lot of stuff. And so I had a great career with them, and then I retired to Tampa, Florida, 13 years ago, and I adore it there. I live on the water, and there's no tourists, and it's quiet, and it's a wonderful place. So I have a lot of time to reflect about Alcoholics Anonymous and God and our history and our steps and our traditions and all the people I've met and the memories, and I love it. I love to reflect on what the world must look like through God's eyes. And the more I do that, the more I'm getting closer to seeing what He sees. And I really believe that that's the point of everything, is to eventually get rid of my old way of seeing things and be allowed the privilege of seeing God's world as it really is, and to see you and I as we really are. And that's just fun. There's no other way to describe it except fun. What a cool thing. It's never bad. It's always good. When I make it up, it's bad. When I create my own reality, it's always bad. I never make up something good to sit up at night. And so this is what has happened to me as a result of these steps. When I sponsor someone, I sponsor people my own way, and it's changed over the years. And now I sit them down and I tell them the first day that I'm your spiritual guide, and you will have a spiritual awakening. And it is going to blow your mind. And when you have it, you will see a world that is so nice and comfortable that there won't be anything for alcohol to fix. And that's why it's easy to not drink. I'm already comfortable. What do I need alcohol for? And I feel that way myself. Bill writes in the 12 and 12 in step 6 that we've been granted a perfect release from alcoholism. A perfect release. I haven't thought about drinking in 43 years. When I look at alcohol, when I'm troubled, I can hardly remember why it would help. Now, eating a stack of pancakes seems to help, or 50 pounds of cookies. So I indulge in all kinds of other things. But alcohol, I don't understand how it could possibly help. It's been put in the category that it's so different. And that I call freedom. Freedom from alcoholism. And it's contingent, of course, on my being able to maintain this view of God and you and I. And that's a very simple thing to maintain. I just stay close to AA. I work with people every single day. I probably go to 2 meetings a day. I don't hardly do anything that isn't AA. It's that's who I am. I just love it in the midst of this society. I think about AA this way. We were talking about, there's a lot of things that we say that I see different now. Things happen in God's time. Well, there's God, and He's wearing a watch. Why don't you ask Him what time it is? He looks at His watch, and I'll tell you what He says. It's right now. Always has been and always will be. How about that? Watch, it says it's right now. No moving parts, and it's always right. For eternity, it's always right. And so that's the only place that God can be found. We can't have contact with God in the past or the future. So how do you get there? We talk a lot about the now, but how do you get there? Well, I thought about that, and I said to myself, I think you get there the same way that you get to the truth about yourself, which is what our steps do. And how do we get to the truth about ourselves? We get rid of everything that isn't the truth. That's what we do. The steps are nothing more than getting rid of. Get rid of character defects, get rid of old ideas, get rid of this, get rid of that. And then it gets revealed to you as an individual. God will constantly reveal more, reveal more, reveal more. And so I said, well, maybe that's exactly how the now works. I get rid of everything that isn't the present moment, which is the future or the past. Now, a lot of us don't want to get rid of those things. I don't want to get rid of my plans. I don't want to get rid of my causes. I don't want to get rid of my opinions. I don't want to get rid of my memories. I don't want to get rid of. There's all these forces that I created that I think are important, that I want to hold on to. I want to hold on to this dream. Okay, fine. Go ahead and get it, but you won't get God's dream. Go ahead. Well, you're asking too much. You're asking too much in step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all of my defects, which is all of me, everything that I constructed. I like to think of my defects as my kingdom, my world, the one I put together, the one I live in, the one I'm the center of. That's my kingdom. And I started putting it together when I was a little boy, and I made a very scary place to hang out. I don't know why I made it that way, but I did. I filled it with, I'm no good, the world's no good, watch out for this isn't fair, it's not fair, nothing's fair. See that? Look around. Not fair, not fair, not fair, not fair. And I took God's world full of light and I patched it all up with my ideas about everything. And pretty soon there's no light coming through. I just have the world I assembled and lived in. And it got lonely in there and I got desperate. I was tired of it. I'm tired of being alone. I'm tired of hanging out in there waiting for me to think up something else to scare me. It's lonely in there. And I got down to a point which I just recently realized where I became hopeless. And it just occurred to me there's a hopeless paradox, or a hope paradox. I became so hopeless as a result of my drinking that I didn't even know what hope meant anymore. I was absolutely without any hope. And guess what happened? I grabbed God's hand. God seems to come to us in the garbage pile. At the bottom. At the bottom. And I realized that if I'm hopeless, I can touch God's hand. If I'm hopeful, I'm going to touch God's hand. Later, down the road. I'm so hopeful that I will be happy someday. I'm so hopeful that I'll be with God someday. I'm so hopeful that everything will work out well someday. That's a lot of time spent away from the present moment. Matter of fact, that's where I spend most of my life. Waiting for the next moment, which is going to be better than this moment. Oh, it's going to be a lot better. Boy, when I get promoted, boy, when we have a baby, boy, when I get to retire, boy, I'm this close. I don't know to what, but I'm this close all the time. And I never stopped to see if it was already here. Wasn't it handed to me the day I was born? It's here. I have to stop and eliminate everything that separates me from God and the present moment. I think the search for God and for the present moment and for my true self is the same search. Find one, you find all three. Find one, you'll find all three. And so I love the search. What does it say? How many times does it say seek in our literature? God could and would if he were sought. Sought through prayer and meditation. Become a seeker. I remember when we were flying jets, they came out with a heat-seeking missile. And when they fired that thing, and you're in the other plane, you're generating a lot of heat with that jet engine. And that little missile is going, I wonder where some heat is. Pretty effective thing. It goes right to the tailpipe. Boom! And so I think that we can become God-seeking just like that. My hero in AA is Chuck Chamberlain. I suppose Bill's writings. I had such a lack of perspective on history that when my friend Hal Marley would say, you want to go to New York and meet Bill Wilson? I'd go, no. I haven't got enough money. Besides, what do I want to meet him for? I need money. I need a job. I got to do this. And I remember he went up there 6 years in a row, and then Bill died. What do you think I would give to have met him? To just have shaken his hand and say, I met Bill Wilson. But Chuck Chamberlain I did meet, and I went to his house and sat and looked over the Pacific and listened to him talk, and listened to him talk and talk about conscious separation. In my consciousness, I felt that I was separate from God. When I honestly, you could have put a lie detector on me and said, do you feel God? No, I don't see him anywhere. He's nowhere in my consciousness. That's because I had built a kingdom of my own and he wasn't in it. That's the only way I could ever get separated from God. God is everything. If God is everything, then he's me and you. And how could you be separated from God? I mean, how could you possibly be separated from God? And I think I made up a poem. I don't even know if I can remember it. Where shall I hide, I said, where I will never find me? I know, I'll pretend that I'm not me, nor you, nor he. I'll hide in my story and pretend that it's real. I'll believe what I think and I'll feel what I believe. And I lie trapped in a web of my feelings and forget that I am the creator of the web. Oh boy, what a joke on me. What a joke. I myself, through my own thinking, self-centered thinking, created a place where God doesn't exist, and I dwelled in there, and it got very lonely, and I didn't believe you when you said there was a God. But I had one thing that everyone has, and you can't get away from it, and that's the need for God. It's there. There's this emptiness. There's this remembrance of what the union with God feels like. And it's missing, and it won't go away. And alcohol temporarily fixed it. But it's still there, and it stays there. And we try to fix it with everything else. Power and sex and drugs and whatever. But it won't go away. It's still there. It still says you're lonely. You're still just you. You're not there. You're not there. And AA comes and punches a hole in that shell. And my sponsor started pulling me out, and I love it. I love what I see. I see now that you and I are connected. I see that if I am rude and hurt you, it hurts me. Hurts me right away. I'm hurting myself when I offend you. And I can see that now. It used to be a theory, now I can see it. And it's wonderful to realize that we're all connected, that we're all just part of God's great creation. I think the steps are described in a letter that Bill Wilson wrote in his later years. And he wrote to someone, he says, as I reflect upon AA, this is what I see. I see an utter simplicity which encases a complete mystery. This is a simple program. And in its simplicity, we walk in to the mystery of the universe. It's so simple. It's mind-boggling in its simplicity. When I first got here, you said, don't drink. I went, don't drink? I got a lot of problems. You don't drink? You think that's the whole solution? Now what do I tell the new guy? Just don't drink. 2 words. That's the entire plan. Don't drink. And then come over and we'll talk and we'll be guided. And so if I looked at AA today and I tried to reduce it to 2 words, the entire AA program, I would say it's very simple. Let go. That's it. How about that? There's nothing else to do but to let go absolutely. Now, to let go absolutely requires a lot of faith because you're jumping into the unknown. We're going out where God lives. I'm going to let go of everything I'm familiar with, my little resentments, my little prejudices, my little favorites, all the things that are familiar. They're miserable, but they're familiar. And I'm going to reach out. I love the paintings. Michelangelo of man reaching out and trying to touch. And part of him not wanting to. Holding back. My pride doesn't want me to let God win. I want to stay I want my own kingdom. Let God have his kingdom. I want one of mine. I don't want to go there. See, in my kingdom, I'm the king. Everything I do, what I say goes. But it's miserable. It's terrible in here. It's awful. It's dark. It's rotten. It stinks. I've been here forever. I can't stand it. But at least I'm in charge. At least I'm in charge. You're talking about a place that's full of happiness and light and love. What's my role there? Servant? You want me to go from a king to a servant? Me? A servant? Yeah, that's the happiest you will ever be, is to be a servant. And so, how do I do that? Let go. Let go. Let go some more. Let go of this. Let go of that. Letting go. I mean, how could it be that simple? Some of our speakers have talked about, they ought to put a warning label on problems. And the warning label says, warning, do not think about this problem. It'll make it blow up. When we have a problem, the first thing we should do is to let go of it immediately, like a hot coal. God, I got this terrible thing here. That's the best thing you could ever do with any problem that you have, is immediately go, uh-oh, a problem. Oh. Just let it go. I tell people to go to the movies. You got terrible problems, everything's wrong, you're thinking of suicide, go to the movies. Buy a ticket. When you go there, Go out to the street, look at the ticket, see how long the movie lasts. Say, look, God, I'm going to be in the movie for 2 hours and 13 minutes. I'm going to give you everything because I just want to watch the movie. I just want to watch it. I love the cartoons. I love the previews. I love all that. And I want to just watch the movie. Will you watch everything while I'm watching the movie? And then you just watch the movie. Yay! The popcorn. I get popcorn, Coca-Cola. I'm like this. I don't rent movies. I go. I want to be there in the movie theater itself, watching. And then I come out. Amazing the work he did in 2 hours and 13 minutes on all those problems. They seem to be in harmony. They seem to somehow be all right. I see solutions. God is doing for me what I can't do for myself. When I see the sentence, this too shall pass, I go, perhaps it should say this too can be let go of. Because it's not going to pass until I let go of it. You want some help? Yeah. I can't help till you let go of it. Oh, okay. And there it is. Whatever needs to be taken care of, God is standing there. What do you need done? Let me do it. Let me do it. And part of me doesn't want to do that because then he gets the credit. I'm reduced to a non-role in my own life. And I realize now I try not to pay much attention to my life. I try to just watch it. Well, what's going on with me today? Look at that. How about that? As almost an observer, a bystander. Well, look at this. There you are worrying. I'll be at the movie. Don't wait up for me. There's part of me that likes to keep worrying. And I go, good, you do worry. I'm going to go off and go to a meeting and listen to my friend talk. And Al-Anon talks about detachment. I think we can detach from our own lives. Just stay on our spiritual path. Stay with our hand in hand with God. And so that letting go is the utter simplicity. And we walk in and just think how our literature ends. Walking hand in hand. Putting our hand in God's. And just walking. That's what's available if I'm willing to let go. And so it's no wonder the sixth step talks about the struggle of perfection, of perfectly letting go. No one can become perfect, obviously. It's impossible. But perfect help's available. So the only thing standing between me and total contact with God is my reluctance to let it happen. And that's what's standing between you. And perfect happiness is the reluctance to let it happen. Isn't that amazing? That we just sit there ruining our own lives. Yeah, I could be happy, but I'm not going to let me yet. I'm not through with me yet. I got some more beating up to do. I got some more guilt to do. I got some more rage. I got some more... I mean, you can just feel it. You mean I'm just going to give all this up? I won't even keep track of the election? Wow. Can you imagine that? So anyway, I see, wrapping it up, that utter simplicity is just that. It's just letting go. And we walk into the mystery. I really believe that God is a mystery. The universe is a mystery. And we got to stop using our ego to figure it out. There's nothing to be known. There's just something to be experienced. We can sit with great wonder. I sometimes think, God, that the favorite prayer I could give to God is, wow! Wow! Look at that! An elephant! Look at that! A quasar! Look at that! Look at that! There's so much to look at and go, wow. But unfortunately, We have all these things we got to do. And it's the silliest thing in the world. I realized how many years I spent solving problems that I created. Well, let me see what I can worry about this afternoon. I'll give you an example with the downturn and the crashing and the stock market and all of that. I go to Club Yana, which is where I go, and now this person's laid off and that person's laid off. The club is filled with drama. And I'm retired. And I just get my little check every month. So this stuff is having no effect on me. Am I grateful? Yes. But I'm also wanting to be in on the action. I don't get to go, ooh, biggest drop in history. Ooh, did you hear that? So I went home and I thought, and I said, you know, if this keeps up, we could have total anarchy. They'll be running the streets with guns and knives, and they'll be looking for people who get a check every month. And they're going to come to my house. They're going to put my hand down. They're going to cut off my little finger. And they're going to go, you sign it over or we cut off this one. Every 10 minutes, another one. And I go, oh, my God. So now when the stock market goes, boom, I go, oh, my God, I'm going to lose a finger. So I'm in the game with everyone else. Yay! If you don't think you create your own problem, look at our steps. Our whole program is to help us dismantle what we put together so we can see God's world. If you're new, you're in for the experience that you were born to have. That's why you're here. You're a prodigal son and a prodigal daughter who's going to go home. You remember it. And when you see the light and you start feeling God's hand, you'll say to yourself, how could I have forgotten? I've been there forever. How could I have forgotten this? So this is not just getting sober. This is the whole point of being a human being. And Dr. Young said that. And he said a very interesting thing, and then I'll wrap it up with this, in his letter back to Bill, after he told Bill how happy he was that Roland Hazard had gotten sober and that he had thought of alcoholism was a thirst for God, which I think it's a very nice way of looking at being an alcoholic. Well, what's an alcoholic? Oh, I have an extra longing for God. Isn't that a nice, that's a nice disease to have, you know what I mean, an extra longing for God. But he went on in the next paragraph just to make a general observation about planet Earth and human beings. He said, I've been studying human beings for 70 years. And they have to struggle against evil. We would call it character defects. And he said, unfortunately, evil always wins. Unless a person can have a spiritual awakening and be in a society that enables them to maintain and increase that spiritual awakening. He was describing utopia, which we know is Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the ultimate society that could be created in a spiritual fashion. And look where they went to get the citizens, in the garbage pile. They went down into the stinky, rotten cesspool of humanity and created heaven. Thank you all very much.